morning. So it's clear that 2020 was a unique year for all of us. We often didn't know where we were or what we weren't doing, and that even included here at Shepherd of the Cross. And today I'm here with Pastor Elise and Heather, and they are going to take us on a journey of what the church year was like, where we've been, where we are, and where we're heading. So our first question to Pastor and Heather today is, thinking about the past year, what are some of the highlights of our life together as a congregation?
Well, when we think back to where we were in November of 2019, and we were planning for 2020, nowhere in that plans did we have any clauses for what to happen in the midst of a pandemic. So when we talked about this at our last council meeting of how we thought 2020 went, there was kind of three themes that came up. That this year was a year of creativity, energy, and commitment, all of which took us to where we are today. When the pandemic hit, it really was kind of a scramble to get what we needed to be able to still be a congregation and to somewhat carry on with our normal functions, which we were able to do. We were able to come together and worship together, and we have tweaked that over time to get us to where we are today, so things are a little bit better than where they were at the beginning. We were able to do the Palm Sunday parade with the entire community, which was actually really inspiring and hopeful to see the community come together to do that. And we've just continued to make adjustments as we've gone.
And I think to hop off that, Heather, too, I know one thing that I've been thinking about throughout this entire year is how resilient our kids and our youth have been. Initially, many of you know that our youth group is quite active, not only in the fact that they are participating with us, but they're physically very active. And so as I thought with Darren, what are we going to do with this active group of kids on Zoom? We kind of both looked at each other and had no idea. And yet, as we went on, that idea of being creative, of continuing that energy and still having commitment, those youth stayed with us. And it's things like that that inspired us to hop along with MCSA and paint downtown and paint their dining hall. Or we went downtown and chalked the downtown. We had to get really creative in order to keep the ministries going, even for that age group. But it happened, and that was really inspiring.
It was, and we have worked as a congregation to also do work outside of these walls. We have gotten the LSI donations. I think we raised about $640, which is seriously amazing considering we still aren't even gathering together to collect that. It's money that people sent in on their own time. And we've also found ways to make improvements with things within the church to help us better function the way we need to during this time and hopefully going into the future.
Heather, I still remember one of the first Sundays we were back here in the building when we had worship. For a while we were at home and I was doing all of this Zooming from my living room, but one of the first Sundays we were back inside here at the sanctuary, I came in the day before and it looked like technology just barfed over our entire sanctuary. There were cords everywhere. There were new computers. I didn't even know what to do to turn on the sound system. I just said, help. But the truth was, with all of those technological improvements, it hasn't just been things that we've needed for right now. In fact, it's things that are going to take us into the future. I think it was at our November 2019 budget meeting that the council shared with the congregation hopes of 3 different phases that we wanted to be exploring, and thinking about replacing the lights and mounting the projector and being able to have a new sound system. You remember any of this, right? But the reality is actually 2020 forced us to do some of it. And now we've actually been able to chip away at those things, and those things are going to be ready for us whenever it is that we do gather back here, which is amazing. It really, truly is amazing.
So then what have you learned from this past year?
When I think about this past year as a pastor, I have to confess that much like Heather said, you don't plan for a pandemic. I didn't go to school to know how to lead a congregation in the middle of a pandemic. But what I did learn during my schooling went through this year. And we are always taught that the church isn't about the building. It's about the people. And I think we all had to learn that this year because we didn't have the church. We didn't have the building where we could gather, but we were still the church, and we needed to live it in what we were doing. Mattered in how we were connecting to each other, and even it mattered in how people were willing to, hey, take up the slack and say, hey, I'm going to do this, and I'm willing to work with this with my kids on my own rather than doing it during a structured Sunday school. And you all figured out ways that we could do that together.
And also just thinking about if this were to have happened 10, 15 years ago, before we had the technology that we do today, before we have the stability of a congregation that we have today, we kind of would have just been a hot mess. Through all of this, though, we have been able to stay connected. We've had game nights on Zoom. We've had Christmas parties. We've celebrated Easter. Everything that we would normally do together, we still find ways to do the majority of it on our own at home, but still yet together.
And I think it's to that point, Heather, too. I thought of many times this year when we were thinking about what we were doing and how we were doing it. My mantra became, is this helping us stay connected to Christ? And is this helping us stay connected to one another? And if it did, it was full steam ahead. We were all for it, trying to figure out how to do it. And if it didn't, that kind of became a check for us of, well, then why are we doing it? And so I think in truth this year, we also learned that actually the work of the church and being the church is more simple than we think sometimes. It actually all comes down to that. How are we being connected to Christ, and how are we being connected to each other? And really, that's our identity as a congregation. And the more we stick to our identity as a congregation, the more that we can actually live as God created us to be. And oh my gosh, we're actually fulfilling God's ministry in ways that we might not have ever imagined before.
So where do you see us going in the coming year?
I think this coming year, we are again going to need to still have the creativity, that energy, that commitment from the congregation to get us through. Obviously, 2021 is starting off with us still worshiping at home. It's limited access to the building. But we also kind of know what we're doing. And even once we're through with the pandemic and we can start gathering in small groups, we have a lot that we have learned from this past year that we can take into the future, whether it's, yes, having meetings here and in person, but I know for me personally, I have 4 kids at home. Getting to a meeting isn't always practical, but I can hop on Zoom and I can still participate on Zoom in that meeting rather than not being able to participate at all. So there are going to be opportunities that come up, things that are different and tweaked and different ways of looking at things because we now have a different experience and we've had to implement things that maybe we wouldn't have thought of had 2020 not happened.
When we think of everywhere that we've been in 2020, I sometimes have looked back on the year and thought, well, shoot, it just felt like we were just constantly reacting to what needed to be done. We were just looking at the immediate future. Just get to the next Sunday. Just get through the next season. Just get to Easter. Just get to Christmas. And it seemed like we were just always looking for that next mile marker. But what Heather and I, when discussion before we were recording this for you guys, were thinking about too is how actually in making all these decisions and implementing new ideas and new ways of doing ministry, how we've actually also prepared ourselves for what's to come. It's not to say that ministry will always look like it does right now. I think we all would agree that that's not our vision. But I think we can all agree that ministry is going to look a little bit different. And how we choose to continue forward is going to be shaped by our time that we've experienced during the pandemic as well.
And I think it's also important to remember that 2020 wasn't all bad. God is still moving in this place. We have been blessed with so much to be able to be here, to be able to look back and think, okay, this summer we were lucky. We have an outdoor space that we were able to gather. There are many churches, especially in this community, that don't have that space, that haven't been together. So going forward, I think it's important to remember that, yes, we're still learning, we're still growing, we're still going to need to make tweaks to make things work. But together, we can pretty much get through whatever we set our mind to.